G'day there, this is Ryan Musgrave-Evans. Welcome to the Majeena lecture series, a new group of videos I'm going to be doing, and I'll have them as a separate playlist on my channel. The Architecture of Absence. This is Session A, Episode A. Now, before I begin and go into anything much, I'm going to say like and subscribe. Like and subscribe and spread disease and chaos. No. Yeah, spread the word, the message. Share. That's the word I'm looking for, perhaps even. Share this pretty little dial amongst your friends online. Send, spread, share, do that kind of thing, and I'd be very appreciative. And also, give me some money. That's always important, isn't it? Apparently. So yeah, I'm on Ko-fi. Like, if you like this presentation or any other presentation or video or ramble I've done or whatever, or on my book, it's available on Amazon. If you like any of that shit, then just chuck a couple of bucks my way and that'd be lovely. Thank you. Okay, so new lecture series. Well, they're not really lectures. I don't know what the fuck you'd call them. We'll see as we go along. Presentations, spiels, sessions, but related specifically to Majeena philosophy, their worldview, their culture, their spirituality, religious system, I suppose you would say, religious thoughts, but the concepts that underlie their worldview. So this is the first, and I'll use the letters of the alphabet to distinguish these ones instead of, this is going to be the Architecture of Absence A. The following one will be B, so on and so forth. Whereas with my Orion Rambling presentations, whatever the fuck they are, I was using numbers to designate them. So we're mixing it up a bit here. We're trying something new. Right. Okay. Now, and so it began. When I was a child, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I think I would have been. Probably 4, more likely 4 years old. I remember having a thought. And the thought was, as I was playing with a Lego man and had other pieces of alternative pieces for other Lego men strewn about the floor, I looked at one of them and I thought to myself, this is a Lego man. If I take his legs off and replace them with the ones on the floor that I've got here, is it still the same Lego man with different legs? But what about the head? If I say yes, then hold on, what about if I change the head? Is that still the same Lego man? Now with different legs, different head. So what I was struggling with was, and my profound conclusion I came to at the time, when I was 4, was, well, the Lego man himself, even though I didn't use these terms, I didn't have this vocabulary to hand at the time, but the idea of being a Lego man is something of a convention. That there was a Lego man at all. That I'm agreeing to talk to other people about a Lego man, but only to communicate an idea to the people around me about a particular piece of reality. Okay, so where is the Lego man? And I was thinking all these profound thoughts in my 4-year-old brain. Now, at the seat, at the very fundament of Majeena understandings of the nature of reality, as I've come to understand more and more as the years have gone on. I would have called perhaps the Majeena belief system and worldview, metaphysically speaking, in philosophical terms, metaphysically speaking, a kind of idealism, perhaps. Now, I have made other videos about Majeena belief system, and I won't go into detail right now about those metaphysical terms, the distinction between idealism and materialism or realism, and a kind of dualism in between. Disagreements between philosophers and different people as to what lies at the essence of reality. Are there different substances making up reality? Is mind the only substance? Is matter the only substance? Are some things made of mind and some things made of matter? And this kind of thing. A lot of it just disagreements as to defining terms in the first place, I think, in my opinion. But anyway, now I don't want these series to become too jargon based. So I'm not, and I'm very rarely, if ever, going to refer to philosophers, famous, typical, classical, modern philosophers and their ideas necessarily. Although, whenever you're talking about philosophy, you're always standing on the shoulders of people that came before you. So a lot of different people's ideas are going to be implied in things that I'm saying, but I'm not actually going to explicitly reference these people because it'll get too confusing to people that are not used to philosophy with a capital P, the academic discipline. Now, what we have going on here with the Majeena worldview is something that I have come to think of as a world that relies on concepts relating to an architecture of absence. So what I mean by this will become more apparent as this goes on, and this is the introduction lecture to this. Okay, like with our Lego man, like we've got the 4-year-old Orion there going the Lego man, and this is appealing to ideas that people have been having all the time. The joke about the old man who has an axe and he says, "This is the most wonderful axe I've ever owned. I've had it all my life. I've had to replace the haft 5 times and the head twice, but it's just been so reliable and it's the best axe I've ever owned." These are questions of identity, individuality, what makes an object itself and not another object next to it. How are we carving reality? How are we carving people out of the universe? How are we carved from the universe in the sense of carving as separated from? What is it about a particular person, John Thomas, that makes them John Thomas and not Sharon Weasley standing next to him? How are they two different people? How do they have separate identities? How are they individuals? How does everyone consider them to be separate? How is one axe not another axe? When is an axe stopping being an axe? When is a person, and when do they stop being a person? How many pieces of a person do you have to replace with something else before they stop being themselves and start being something else? For instance, which are relevant, I think, questions about, how much of a person, if they're slowly becoming something like a cyborg or a transhuman and having elements of themselves replaced with cybernetic elements or silicon-based manufactured Pardon me. Um, Props, replacements for limbs, say, or organs. When is Sharon no longer Sharon? You know, she's got all these pieces that have been replaced on her. You know, you keep replacing more and more pieces, and in the end, Sharon's, her brain and, part of her nose. Is that still Sharon? When did it stop being her? Blah, blah. Okay, these questions. Now, according to Majeena thought processes, these questions are any answers given to these questions can only ever be arbitrary. They can only ever be conventions. As we navigate and communicate our way through this reality with each other and interacting with the universe, with the world. So what does make a person a person? And some people say, well, it's that person's individuality, their personality, in sort of abstract ways, the ways that they are prone or could potentially behave in certain ways if confronted with certain situations, makes John Thomas John Thomas. John Thomas gets frightened of horses. John Thomas likes chocolate. John Thomas can't abide cubes. John Thomas is allergic to prawns. John Thomas really loves a good juicy orange. This is John Thomas. Physically, materially, we might say John Thomas begins and ends where pieces of matter carrying his DNA begin or end. These are, in the end, people can really get bogged down in arguing or trying to hone and come to some kind of conventional agreement between themselves, between different people, different groups, as to what the answers of these questions are. But the answers to these, where a person's identity begins and ends, where one person begins and another person stops, how we carve and manufacture reality out of this empirical presentation, this universe as a whole, it can only ever be arbitrary. You decide to stop it here. You decide to stop it there. Why? For the purposes of communication, for the purposes of presentation, for the purposes of managing your own thought processes, perhaps, you could say. Categorization. Manufacturing reality. We can look down to what we have with, say, manufacturing a reality out of digital information, a binary system of ones and zeros, of a lingam and a yoni, of 1, 0, 1, 0, and building from these basic fundamental blocks artificial realities, say. Cyberspace and computer programs. Now, what does 1 mean in a binary system? Well, it's defined negatively. It has a negative definition. It is not a 0. All that 1 means is that it's not the 0. All the 0 means is that it's not a 1. And once you have a system, a language, based on 2 units like this that are defined in antithesis to each other, you can start making shit. You can start building a reality. The world is no longer just potential, which is to say that it could be anything. Anything could go. It becomes specific. It becomes actualized. Okay. It becomes either this or that. It becomes tangible. It's not just artificial realities when we think of like manufacturing fake universes, say, in the sense that they're fake, like cyberspace, computer programs, games, this kind of thing. There's a particular word I'm trying to think of at the moment. I can't think of it, but it might come back to me. But if you have the so-called real world, the world that we consider to be a shared reality, the shared paradigm of us as different people and individuals interacting in the world, interacting with different objects, physical objects, and in our space, object with each other in temporal ways, in time and spatial ways in space. This real world is being carved out of potentiality. We manufacture ideas that are defined in antithesis to each other before there can be some kind of manifestation. So we say, what is black? Well, it isn't white. What is good? Well, it isn't bad. What is hot? Well, it isn't cold. These digital systems, and then adding binary systems, and then adding to them by exponentially developing more and more complexity to that, still based on defining things as to what their opposite is, moving through the world and adding more and more and more to it in that kind of binary digital way, can then carve perception out of reality. And we're doing it all the time when we teach our children what's real and what isn't. What's this? It's a book. It's a book. How is that a book? Where's the book? Here's the book. Oh, wait a minute. This part in here isn't the book. This is not included. This is the book, and that wasn't. This part of reality will remove, and it has a different name. It is a bookmark. This is to take the totality of perception, identify certain elements or characteristics of empirical reality, of objects and what they share with others, and looking for patterns, and instructing the next generation where certain things begin and end, where these patterns are, where these concepts begin and end, when is something this and when isn't it anymore, when is it that, when is it not, what is a Lego man, what isn't a Lego man. Now, it can get quite rubbery and fall to pieces and really go over the edge when we start to try to pull down to the nitty-gritty of these realities that we're carving with language and conceptually out of the sum total of experience and of the universe. Okay, so what does this mean for the idea of souls, which lots of people talk about? Of course, some people say, what's the individual? The individual is a soul. A person is, Michael and not Deirdre, because Michael and Deirdre have different souls, or they are embodiments, they're incarnations of souls in the flesh or something, and that souls are objects that are distinguishable and distinguished from each other, and have their own distinct identity and are somehow perhaps atomic in their structure, in the sense of the word atomic, like they are what's the word? They cannot be broken down anyway. I can't think of the exact word there. Broken down into smaller constituents. That they are atomic souls. This is Michael, and Michael's soul is eternal, and it's what Michael is, and perhaps that soul can even be manifested again later on in different incarnations of people that are still somehow essentially inherently Michael and essentially inherently Deirdre, as though they are objects that can be carved out, that there's a Michaelness that can be carved out of reality that is eternal and ongoing. Like there's some kind of essence to that original Lego man. That Lego man, no matter how many parts of him are replaced, there's still something at his core that makes him the same Lego man. Okay. Now, in Majeena spirituality, what makes a person is what I've come to call, these aren't words that they use, but I've come to call it this, or think of it as this, is it's an architecture of absence. What is Michael? Or what is Deirdre? Michael is an element of reality. Michael is defined by not being the rest of the universe. Okay, so this is again a definition, a negative definition. Deirdre is herself, and herself is something that is not the rest of the universe. So it's a shorthand to say Deirdre in a sense, because we could we could also communicate, perhaps, or we could express the idea of Deirdre by reeling off every single thing in the history of the world and the universe and the thought of humankind that wasn't this particular individual at this time in space, Deirdre. But it's much easier to just say Deirdre. Okay, then we start getting into trouble when we're really looking for Deirdre, or when we're really looking for Michael. Like the Lego man, as we're looking for them, as we're replacing pieces of them, perhaps with, we'll say, for argument's sake, cybernetic pieces, we won't get too out there and weird and say we're replacing parts of Michael with Deirdre. We'll leave it a little bit simpler than that, at least for this presentation. When is Michael no longer Michael? When is Deirdre no longer Deirdre? Well, people that believe in like an eternal soul, which lots of religious systems through history have done, as though it is some kind of object and a thing in itself that is eternal, would say, oh, well, as long as the soul of Michael is still present, he's still Michael, and even he can be reincarnated in a completely different flesh unit and still be Michael, essentially, because Michael is eternal and distinct from the rest of the universe forever. Amen. But now I'm going to use a lot of metaphors here, because we're sort of circling the principal idea of the architecture of absence that is the nature of a person, or the nature of any object, or the nature of an explanation for reality as it stands, a philosophical explanation. We're going to circle the idea. We're going to stealthily approach the idea. We're going to do this through the use of metaphorical language, through figurative speaking. Each of these metaphors will be a functional fiction. Don't get too hung up on each metaphor I'm about to use. But they will help move us toward grasping something like a hint and a glimpse of the worldview of the crypto-terrestrials, of the Majeena, which is something that is fairly alien to a lot of people, I think, but not necessarily to all people. I think there are a lot of people around that subscribe to something similar to the view we're talking about here, and I'll go into in more detail to clarify. Now, let's think of this simple metaphor at first. We'll say life and consciousness as a light bulb, and the light from the bulb. Okay. And whether you want to call this light bulb God with a capital G, or the universe, perhaps, deity, the source, is up to you. Brahman, whatever. Okay, so these kinds of ideas perhaps are sort of comparable to, let's just say, the totality of consciousness in the universe. Now, I was thinking of putting a colander over the top of this globe that has little holes in it. In a dark room, people have probably heard of this kind of figurative way of explaining consciousness of individuals before, but Just bear with me if you've heard this before, but some people may not have. The projections on the ceiling, on the walls in this dark room, coming from the bulb underneath, every little pinpoint of light is an individual, is a soul, perhaps you could call them, if you wanted to, if you believed in that kind of thing. Now, you could just as easily say like one of those child's toys that has a light in the middle of something dark that spins, that has cutouts of stars and moons and maybe astronauts and UFOs and rockets and things like that, and it spins and it's throwing onto the wall all of these different distinguishable images that seem separate. They're separate pieces of light with separate and distinct realities, separate and distinct identities. Some, especially if they appear to us as being different, if you've got like a children's toy so that it's got all different kinds of different shapes and stars and all this kind of stuff. Now, where is the individual? Is dying. Where is the individual in this? Where is, in what way is that little pinprick of light on the ceiling that you were calling, that you've divvied up in your reality and are communicating with other people in the room saying, look at that particular star, you see that star? Everyone knows what you're talking about. Everyone's attention has been drawn to that particular pinpoint of light on the ceiling that's moving. And everyone goes, yes, we all agree there's something there. But where is it? Where is it essentially? What is it intrinsically? Is it illusory that it is separate and independent from the original source? If to cover up the hole, to change the shape of the hole, turning and twisting and changing the shape of the light, when was it the original light? And if you change the shape of the carving, is it now the same light but a different shape, or is it a different shape? Is it a different light? These are... Okay. As individuals, we are expressions of something that is in all of us. The one central light. Okay. As an individual, as me, as Ryan, I am but a pinprick of light on the ceiling. When I die, that light is gone. How? Perhaps we could have in this metaphor covering up the hole. Where did I go? Where did that light go? Once you do that, where's that light? What happened to it? It's no longer a star. Okay. Think of this metaphor as well. The idea of God or some kind of divinity as a person in a large house that has many windows. They are perched on the side of a cliff, looking out over a ravine. There are beautiful valleys off in the distance. There's a forest behind them nearby. Behind the house. To each side they have fields with animals grazing. They stand in the center of this house. There are windows on an angle on the ceiling that are angled towards the sky, from which the individual, the god, can see the sky and clouds rolling across. Some of the windows look out to the animals grazing beside on this side, others to this side. Some of the windows face out to the ravine with the valleys behind. Some of the windows look out the back into the forests back there close by. Now, the metaphor for this is an individual person is the view presented. Any individual in the world is but a view of this deity presented to this deity if they care to look out the window. Any of the windows. The scene it offers and provides them. Some people are looking back out into the forests. Some of them are looking out into the ravine and valleys. Some to the animals here, some to the animals there. The totality of a person is, as the god moves around and stands at different windows and is presented with certain scenes, this is a person's life. These are people's lives that are reduced or retracted forms of this god's total experience. Looking out the window at the ravine and the valleys off in the distance, for a certain amount of time, this god may wander away from that window. That's a death. How can that window and that presentation and the view offered to this deity, how can that ever be regained, reincarnated, reproduced? Okay, I'm just leaving these questions out there. So I'm going to powder my nose. So an individual, a unique individual, perhaps you could say a soul, is a particular experience offered to the divine being at a particular time with a particular scenery. When that deity decides to go and make himself coffee, go to the shitter, put some clothes on the line, go to the shops, that original expression, that empirical reality that was there for that deity, that experience ends. Can it ever be refound? And what is it? It is a very small piece carved from the total experience of that god. A very small, relatively, we'll say that this god is eternal. A small aspect of their life and their reality and their thoughts and their sense experience at the time. So here we have this idea again of individuality being that being a metaphor for the individual, as individuality being a limitation, a contraction of something that's much more. Objects being of any kind, being carved as limitations from the rest of reality, as negatively defined aspects of reality, and that they are something. And what are they? Just not everything else. That particular view of the god, as they were looking out the window at that particular time, is something because it is none of the other windows in their house. It's none of the other times that they've gone to look out that window when the sceneries look different. It's none of the other times they've looked out any of the other windows. It is something very particular, defined by what it is not. It is not this, it is not that. And it is emptiness or absence of certain parts of reality. Most of the rest of reality. An absence of most of reality. So a human being, if we can look at a human being, or as some kind of individual, in this sense, you could see them as being a highly detailed, three-dimensional, hollowed out piece of a giant redwood that has been, let's say we use lasers. Here's another metaphor. Use lasers that when they meet from different angles and cross paths, enough heat is created to destroy certain parts of the tree on the inside. And we manufacture this amazing inverted image of a person with all of the details inside the tree, so that when people come at a later stage and cut into the tree, they can take away these layers and they can see that there's a negative of space, the tree representing outside of the space of the object, in this sense, the space being missing. If we look at the tree and see that as the universe and the individual as being the hollowed out, highly complex aspect, say, regardless of how complicated or complex you make the individual, they are the absence of the other. They are the absence of most of the rest of the tree. That's what makes this object as an absence of tree itself. It is defined by its lack of tree, by what it isn't. Now you might say, okay, this is a bit woo-woo. What's going on here? This is making reality seem quite intangible. This is very important, though, to get your head around these ideas. Just because they are, if you're interested in cryptoterrestrials, if you're interested in the Majeena, because this lies at the very center of, that is the bedrock idea of their worldview, that the world is arbitrarily defined by convention, carving up reality to make distinctions. Okay, and potential, the idea of potential reality comes to bear. Potential reality is neither this nor that. Potential reality has not in any way been carved up. Potential reality is to say every possibility, everything in the world that could possibly happen or not happen, with no actualization, with it not actually actualized by saying, I haven't opened this drawer here. I'm not sure if there are pens in it or not. The potentiality is this stage of reality where nothing yet is this or that. The pens are neither there nor absent. They just once, for something to be actualized, it must then be carved out of the rest of reality by identification of what it is not. And I open the drawer, and there are pens in there, which has just removed infinite amount of possible variations that could have been in the potential reality. There could have been one pen, could have been half a pen, there could have been three, there could have been pens that were different colors aligned different ways. All of this, so many, infinite variation to potentiality. Massive amounts of information for potential. Once actualized, all carved away. It is just this. All of a sudden, it is none of the rest of the possibilities of reality. It is just a very actualized, tiny little sliver of what could have been. Boom. Defined by not being everything else in the world. So who are you? You are actualized by being a tiny fraction of possibilities that could have developed and been engineered. in and by the universe as it was moving along. An actual, you are actualized. You are a particular point of view of the deity at a particular time in a particular place, retracted from the totality of the universe to be something very specific. You know, you are Gordon. You probably aren't, but you know, whoever whoever was watching this, whose name happens to be Gordon, I'm very happy that your eyebrows just leapt up your forehead a little bit. Anyway, what happens once a person dies? What happens to this? Or what is the soul then? You know, and I'll leave that sort of open to interpretation. I mean, where do you find the soul here? Where are you going to find the soul? Where you're looking for the soul? What do you mean by soul? That could go in a lot of different directions if you want to redefine by this theory. Well, it's not a theory. I mean, you could look at it as a theory if you want, but it's a belief system of a certain group of people. Whether or not it's actually represents a better understanding of the nature of the world than any of Homo sapiens' belief systems, or you know, theories as to physics or religious systems, spiritual systems and stuff, whether it's superior to them in the sense that maybe it encapsulates an actual absolute truth better than any of ours do, is another question again. What we're talking about here is the way the Majeena see the world, not necessarily the way the world actually is. So this is a belief system linked with senses of sacredness and spirituality the way they understand the workings of the world, and what makes up the world, and what things are and what they aren't, and what's real and what isn't, and how to distinguish between what to do next and what not to do next, and how to carve realities. So this is an essential aspect to their understanding about piloting reality. It's to carve futures out of the universe, actualize certain aspects of reality and pull it out and design it, actualize it so that it's distinguished from the potentiality, the non-world, the every world and no world, the potential reality of the unactualized universe, which is most of it, to find where they want to go and to actualize something so that it is not that, defined by what it is not. So it's an architecture of absence. Humans are, and any object in the world, are empty carvings from the potentiality of what is, or what could be. From the potentiality, from what could be, we are actualized and we are. But where are we? How do you find us? How do you find our essence? How do you find the Lego man? Where is the Lego man? Another metaphor, which is actually one they've used with me, and I wasn't sure if I came up with it myself, just sort of an idea, but they've said to me since that they actually said it to me, gave it to me as a way of trying to get me to understand certain ideas. These are all kind of functional fictions, as I said before. What is a person? Here we have another aspect, another way of circling the nugget of truth as to their ideas, to slowly approach from different angles and try to gain a glimpse of their worldview, the Majeena worldview, is if you picture the cosmos as a thin layer of fabric, like a sheet, like a piece of linen, cotton. If you throw that onto the floor, that piece of fabric, it turns and twists and makes all of these folds and dips and raised parts and troughs and what you have are these crinkles. And a person, and indeed any object really, but a person is a crinkle in the fabric of the cosmos. It doesn't matter how detailed architecturally the crease is, and the absence of cloth lying in it, and how much the crease thinks of itself or is thought of as being somehow an object within itself, some kind of atomic object distinguishable from the rest of reality and unbreakdownable. I can't think of the word at the moment, but absolutely that word, I'll find that word at some stage. Maybe I'll put it on here if I can find it. Think of it. It'll come back to me. But anyway, if you cannot, it doesn't matter how much that this crease and its architecture and its intricacies and its detail are there, for the cloth to be spread out again is the realization that it never really had its own essential self. It was always only part of the cloth. That it was some kind of thing in itself, of its own right, existing in the cosmos, was kind of like a gift to it at some stage. To die is for the cosmos to flatten out around you, for you to become one with the cosmos, with the fabric, to realize that you were nothing ever but dips and troughs and ridges in the fabric of the cosmos. Where's the crease? Once it's gone, where's it gone? Where's it gone? Can it be remade? Can you set up circumstances and situation and scenario so that that same crease that was there before that is now lost can somehow be remade and reborn and re-expressed and reincarnated? Will it still be the same crease? How is that in any way, even if you make it in the very same spot? Repeat the architecture to the exact degree of all the little dips and ins and outs and tiny little subtle fluctuations and in bits and pieces of it, so that there's beautifully recreated crease that looks identical to the crease that was there 10 minutes before that was flattened out. Is that the same crease? Or is it simply another crease that is identical? Whether you say yes to the first, to the former, or yes to the latter, is, by Majeena understanding, arbitrary, conventional. There's no absolute answer to that. Cool. Now, I think maybe I'll leave that one there. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I'll be making videos more in this vein occasionally, and I'll have it on a different playlist, and I'll call them The Architecture of Absence, A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. And it'll be exploring ideas that the Majeena have talked to me about and presented to me and shown me in different ways. Stuff that they've been telling me all of my life that at first I considered maybe to be my own ideas, and then came to think that I was being instructed by some kind of mystical being or fairies or something like that, which then has become more clear to me that I can't claim these kinds of ideas. Really, being explained and shown to me. Perhaps you know, here and there, I can be given a little bit of credit by formulating certain easier ways of expressing and understanding them for myself, which now I'm passing on to you dudes. How similar or dissimilar these kinds of ideas are to what other people have thought or said before. I'm sure that these kinds of ideas that I'm expressing at the moment have been talked about by other people. The original ideas of the Buddha, of course, the Buddha, or however you want to pronounce it, have a fair bit in common with these ideas of a non-self or a non-soul, of a person or a soul, or indeed any object just being like a cluster of ideas, an amalgam of different aspects of reality. Yes, that in itself is a similar kind of thing to what the Majeena are on about. Different kinds of idealism, like Kashmir Shaivism, they've said is quite similar to the way they see the world, certain aspects of it. And different philosophers and probably physicists look at the world in this way, or in a similar way sometimes, or approach an understanding of this, or suspect that maybe this is a good way of understanding the world, whether or not it's actually true in the end. It's a functional fiction. In the end, if it's a functional fiction, well, it's a Majeena's functional fiction, and if people are interested in the way they see the world, regardless of the truth value of their belief system, that's interesting in itself. But then they have a keen understanding, good understanding of, I think, much like superior to our understanding of the physics of reality and how to move through different worlds, literally, different timelines, and how to engineer different situations in reality, and their technology and science is well beyond ours. So maybe their spirituality and some of their fundamental ideas about the nature of reality are beyond ours as well, maybe, or maybe it's just completely relativistic, and you could just look at their belief system as just being like any other belief system. If you were to come across a group of people living on an island on the earth somewhere that no one else has ever found out about yet, that's a fairly unlikely situation at this point, but just imagine if we were to come across a little island out in the middle of the ocean somewhere that no one had noticed people live on before, and they have their own way of seeing the world and this and that, and you go, oh, well, we're going to research these people. Their culture and their belief system, their spirituality has intrinsic worth in itself in a culturally relativistic way. Cultural relativism, seeing different peoples and groups and ethnic groups and cultural backgrounds as being just different and all intrinsically equally worthy, that none are more important or better than any others, or have any more right to existence than any others, and things like that. I'm more inclined to look at the world in that way, and the Majeena system, perhaps it's got its benefits, and perhaps it's that kind of worldview can lend itself to the creation of technologies that are more efficient at interfacing with and manipulating our world, for time travel, interdimensional travel, anti-gravitic stuff, free energy and all that kind of stuff. So there it is. So that's the first Architecture of Absence essay, lecture, spiel, talk thing. And if you're into these videos more, check these videos out as I'm making them. If you're into the other ones more, check out the other ones. If you like both of them, then gravy, yeah? And more than time, Kid Mel Tang, Tapaliv.